Hola, and welcome to Excellent News Delivery, the most excellent news delivered directly to you. My name's Sam, and this podcast is all about talking about some of the positivity in the world and promoting everyone sort of in a creative platform. And today I've got actually the guest who's done our jingles for this show and is quite sort of growing in the music industry. So I've got Joe here with me today, if you want to say hello.
Hello. Hi.
Um, so just to sort of, as I'm jumping in the music segment, you've kind of gone through a different few names now because I hesitate to limit
Yeah,
you to
yeah.
like your current
Um,
performance name.
yeah, so I've got two like solo aliases. One is like EDM based music, like DJ scene, which is Brosif, Brosif, and then I've got like like indie singer songwriter one under the name of Cooper, and then I'm also part of a band called Soul Horizon. So it's very fun, but lots of work.
Well, I was going to say, not to like divulge too much, but like I've known you for a decent few years, and I mean, working in the creative industry, I think something's that always is fascinating to see is people like you who like completely jump into different projects. So like I've seen,
Mm,
for example, with you, I've seen you jump into so many different music things, and we were talking briefly
yeah.
like you experiment to vlogs, and like we actually worked on a documentary together. And I think it's when you go into the sort of not the beneficial side of it, but to be enjoying and to experiment in the creative world, I think is the sort of real core aspect of it.
Oh yeah, for sure. So like the main reason as to why I've like branched out with different music aliases rather and different projects rather than keep them under one kind of category is kind of all down to marketing from a marketing standpoint. So that way I can like focus a specific brand towards a specific target audience, and that way I can know what I'm doing correctly in certain aspects. Like there'll be different ways of marketing certain types of music to certain types of audiences, and it's important to kind of know what that is and how to push that. And keeping the separate aliases, it really helps with specific marketing.
See, yeah, that's I find fascinating. It's like the depth to just marketing on its own. It's not as simple as like just going with one core identity. You really sort of delve into that, and I think that's again what I sort of admire about the industry. And I've always thought with like, especially with you, you kind of jump into all these different kind of music genres, but you've got that sort of identity to each, and then
For sure, yeah.
you're not afraid to
Like
expand out into other stuff.
yeah, with the whole idea with marketing, it's like a lot of music these days is not just it's not just about the music. It's a lot to do with like branding and a, a lot with social media, merchandising, and all that. Like you'll notice a lot with like certain bands and certain artists. They have a specific brand to their music. It's not just the music. It's like their visuals, their album artwork, their social media. It all has a similar brand identity. So it like brand identity is like equally as important in music as it is in the majority of media.
Just to pick on just a little bit there, because you are the first sort of more heavily based musician we've had on the show. So for people listening, what would you say is sort of the best way of like jumping into this sort of industry?
The best way I'd say is if you want to be like a musician and work in the industry, I'd say obviously you need to kind of experiment and find what I'd say is your sound. Like, what do you have to offer to the music industry, and what makes you so different that people should go out of their way to listen to you? And based on that, you can then begin to once you've got your sound per se, you can then go and work on, okay, who likes this specific sound and who doesn't. Then when you find out who likes it, you can then start networking with like promotion networks and different artists, different record labels, and from there build up a an audience that is engaged with your content.
Very cool, very cool. Well, right, just before we jump into our sort of news segment, one thing I'd like to just promote, I know with this podcast we tend to avoid to go too serious with things, but we would really love to promote both CPR and defibrillators. Approximately in the UK, survival rates will tend to jump from 6% to 74% if CPR is delivered in the first 3 to 5 minutes. There is much more you can read online, and we have a link in the description below to just one charity that focuses on this. But especially in these times, I think it's worth sort of like looking to all this stuff. And if you have the time to just research into that stuff, it's fantastic, and it really sort of helps and makes a difference in lives. But anyway, that was just that as a little just co-away segment with that. We'll jump into our news stuff, which is a little different beat to that. And I'm sure this probably is going to be your highlight here, Joe. I definitely may have not sent you the link to this, but the third film in the Bill and Ted franchise
Oh yeah,
is coming out this year. For those who don't know, that's a franchise that started in the 80s, and it is that sort of, I want to say, that unique 80s vibe film where you really can just sort of tell it's that generation of films where they just went, this sounds like a cool idea, let's just make it.
yeah, for sure. Personally, I've only ever seen sections and segments of the original Bill and Ted films. I don't think I've actually sat down and watched it all the way through.
Oh, you can watch it like that in a way, though. It's a weird film.
Yeah.
Like that, almost like there's gags, and it's almost like there are introverted gags into each sort of segment. So if you're like watching like the highlight reels, they're almost like self-contained jokes that you can enjoy.
Oh, for sure, yeah. From watching the trailer of Bill and Ted Faces of Music, it's like I can understand some of the callbacks to some of the earlier films and stuff, and that kind of relationship between the two main characters.
And I talk about the characters, and I know I'm going to butcher this here, so I'm going to apologize ahead, but Keanu Reeves, if that's how you say his name, doesn't he just look so different, though, in that type of film? Like, without a beard, it just hits you on a different level, doesn't it?
He looks so much older without the beard.
I know, and that's I think that was the first thing that hit me, but I guess, they're keeping with the style where in the other films he never really showed any facial hair, but it does age him up,
he was like a kid, wasn't he?
Yeah. But yeah, that film, I think I promote it because purely like this is just a franchise I've been engaged with for so long, but and we think of things like Clerks 3, which got close to being made and then didn't fully come out. To have this film coming out this year is kind of an exciting thing, and it's again that sort of, I feel like it's a film where they're not expecting it to be super successful, but they're doing it because they're passionate and like the actors love the film, and it's that sort of almost like loving tribute to the audience and the fans.
My goodness, Keanu Reeves is 55.
Yeah. Wow, that is actually quite an intense Asian than you think. I wouldn't say he's that old. Wow.
Neither. I would have thought he was like at least in his 40s.
I was going to say, I'd put in early 40s, late 30s, but there you are. But I definitely think if you check out the description below and you see we've actually got the link to the trailer, you see him and you do think he has sort of, without a beard, weirdly he ages up, which I think is almost reversed for a lot of people. But yes, that film's coming out this year, which is really exciting. We've also got in our news, we've got the first US woman to walk in space, just travel to the ocean's deepest depths. So for someone like just sort of ticking off a bucket list there, that's way higher than anything I can aim for at the moment. But it's that sort of fun atmosphere to it of like being able to do quite literally anything, really, isn't it? But talking about that, and obviously in the situations we're in, I'm going to say this wrong. This word's wrong. Anonymous donors give $40,000 to Florida's cafes to help them stay open during the pandemic and feed hospital workers and also like sort of key workers.
That really like puts faith back in humanity, doesn't it? Like these kind of anonymous people donating like a lump sum of money to keep these small businesses open. It's really quite nice. Well, it gives a kind of sense of community at the end of the day, especially with what's going on.
Yeah, I mean, this is also what is the sort of nice stuff to focus on, is to say that like there are generally like, while there are some limitations that just can't be helped, it's nice to see when there's a community and that sort of sense of community coming together. So especially, like $40,000 is such an excessive amount in terms of like the sheer quantity, but just to have, someone wanting to do that is such a generous and like like you say, it puts faith that there is always going to be that sort of better side to humanity.
Yeah, that is true. That's very true. But like a lot of things with this whole pandemic, it's really shown like I think when this all starts to like kind of calm down, and as we come towards the end of like lockdown and places start to open up and things start to resume back to normal, we're going to see a very big. I feel like we're going to see a very big change in a lot of industries.
Mm.
Especially in the music industry, because like a lot of the way that musicians and why am I saying and? It's just musicians. Musicians make money like is a lot through touring, and obviously people can't do concerts and they can't go touring because concerts are very confined. Lots of people in a very small room, and a lot of way that people have been coming around this is by like live streaming performances through like YouTube and Twitch, and I've seen a lot, like especially with bigger DJs. Like usually these kind of DJs will be paid like hundreds of thousands to play specific gigs, but like when they go and live stream on Twitch or YouTube, they're only getting a couple hundred viewers, and like then you get someone who's like a lesser known DJ, and say for example, they wouldn't get booked because they're not as well known as the higher up DJ, but because they have this well-established fan base online, they can pull in like thousands of viewers for a live stream, and that kind of puts light, and it shows that maybe there is going to be this complete switch in not just the music industry, but a lot of other industries, and you're going to see a lot like more newer faces and a lot fresher faces that emerge out of this kind of pandemic area. So in a way, I feel like it's kind of like a reset to specific industries.
Totally. I mean,
if you understand what I'm saying, yeah.
You think with the independence of industries as well, like, and to categorize music in that sense as well. So like, it's that sort of not like you say, you take a lot of your sort of core concepts of like your identities for different genres, but you're essentially building them up on your own. And a lot of like companies are independently owned are also going through that sort of same phase of trying to aim to create and like produce this sort of whatever products they want to, but it is sort of like really heavily focused on like the individual now.
Yeah, like the much like bigger names, they kind of have like this what I call like a blanket audience. So it's kind of like their music appeals to a large massive audience, and it just kind of blankets over the listeners. And like say for example, usually this kind of music would like maybe be on the radio, or like it'd appear in a Spotify playlist like by chance on shuffle, but then you get like the more independent, like the little guy who's like he's got his well-established fan base, and he gets like a consistent amount of listeners every month, and they're always supporting this person. They're gonna thrive a lot more because they have a reliable source of engaged audience, whereas this kind of blanket musician is not going to have this reliable kind of audience that they can fall back on.
That's really cool to see that sort of perspective.
Because they're relying a lot on big gatherings and the big industry events to kind of survive.
Well, I mean, again, it's really fascinating to hear from someone that actually, is heavily involved in the music industry to see that idea changing. And you've got to think that it's going to apply to a lot of different areas. But anyway, talking about sort of innovating and sort of creating new, the world's largest all-electric airplane takes its historical first flight as its first sort of test run, and that's sort of going to be leading us to potentially a cleaner airplane industry, which in itself you think may not have the massive change that's at the beginning because it's something that would take a while to do. But for their first initial flight, it's almost like the initial testing phase that they've just gotten the clearance for. So this could be something that, in 5-10 years is having a massive impact on the world again, changing sort of like how we're going to sort of be dealing with these situations.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, like a lot of this kind of electric vehicles, they're like huge for the market. Like I think it was quite recently, Tesla has become uh, one of the most valued motor companies in the world, or something like that.
Mm.
And it's an all electric vehicle company, so that's saying a lot for the way that that kind of um, industry is going. Obviously, a lot more car companies are shifting towards hybrid cars and just purely electric cars.
It is something like, especially given the circumstances of where we are right now, it is something fascinating to say. But when you're mentioning Tesla, and correct me if I'm wrong, were they not the ones that did the like almost like all metal car at one point, like with
I think
the
so.
non-smashable car? It was like something like it was an
Oh, that one, the non-smashable window, and then they smashed the window.
yeah, that was Tesla, wasn't it? Before I say it,
Yeah, that was Tesla. Yeah,
um,
yeah, that was Tesla. However, say what you say, Tesla's done quite a big, quite an important thing. So, like, obviously electric cars, they don't have the biggest of mileage on them. So
mm,
there's a bunch of like Tesla, there's a bunch of like electrical charging stations, like a petrol station,
mm,
but it's you plug your car in for an hour and you go off get some lunch or whatever. And
mm-hmm,
a big thing about that is Tesla's obviously implemented these charging stations so early on that they're completely dominating when all these other electrical cars are made. You're going to have Teslas already implemented charging stations ready to go. So it's like they've already got a one up on all the other car industries because they've implemented early and
yeah. No,
they're just easily accessible.
I think that is something really sort of fascinating to consider. That like it's like investing in the future in a way. Like, it might not be the best move right now, but the fact is, like you say, in the next few years, it's going to become more and more of a profitable bit. And if they're standing there already, sort of with themselves ready to go, it's a real sort of interesting aspect to consider. Um,
Exactly, yeah.
anyway, moving on, our next story, and this is actually quite a sweet one. A nurse finally locates a New York firefighter who pulled her from a burning building 37 years later. Um, so sort of just to give some
Wow.
synopsis there, she was 4 years old at the time, and this firefighter saved her life. And then she was working as a nurse, and it just so happened that the name of the firefighter who saved her all these years ago was like listed in the hospital she worked at, and someone else actually knew the number of this individual, and they actually ended up like being able to meet again. You got to think
That's
though, like
pretty cool.
she sort of to like look into the article itself, it sort of refers to like she didn't expect to ever meet him. She didn't even know like if he'd be alive or not because 30 plus years, and she
Yeah.
wasn't aware of how old he was. That is, but it's that sort of sweet bit of like community that like we're bringing together the sort of that connection again, and even all those years later. um
Yeah, it's crazy. Like you just don't expect to I can like say if you someone just did a random act of kindness like to you
mm,
like tomorrow. It's like you're not really gonna. I know. I completely belittled someone being saved from a fire there, but if like someone were to do a random act of kindness to you
mm,
tomorrow, it's like that's so like random. You're not particularly gonna remember it, like who that person is.
mm,
So for that person, like what 30 years later, to still remember the guy's name, and especially being at the age of 4, so I can't
mm.
remember some people. I can't remember people's names when I was 4.
Oh, I was going to say, well, again, not to jump too much, but we've been to university together, and like there are generally some people whose names I'd probably have to really think about, and that's like only a year ago or something if I only met them once. So
Exactly. Like I sometimes struggle to remember what I had for breakfast, let alone if someone saved me from a fire, like when I was 4.
oh, brilliant. But anyway, just to wrap up on this sort of like positive train we're on, so there's a river running through the, I'm going to spell this to you because I don't trust saying this out loud, Zion National Park will be protected forever thanks to the Nature Conservancy. So they actually gave 4.3 million to preserve the ecosystem within this famous canyon.
Ooh.
And actually, like looking at some of the visual pictures of it, it is like I don't know if you. I mean, obviously you've seen films and everything, but if you've actually seen like a proper sort of American sort of desert or like just American fields that just go on for acres, it does give you that sort of look to it, and it to think of how large it is and the money it would take to protect it. It's again the
Yeah.
non-profits organizations that are willing to sort of put themselves forward and protect like what's been in the world for so long. It's that sort of heartwarming stuff.
It is like obviously the landscape's been around for a lot longer than humans have, so it's
Mm.
kind of like. But then again, it's kind of a bit like it's a shame that all this money is needed to protect this area.
Oh yeah, totally. But then you think you've got to consider like with all like constructions and like everywhere,
Yeah,
there's always going to be wanting for more places for people to live, and that's just the normal bit that we live in this world. But it's lovely to see when you see like these companies giving so much money just to protect something, and it's like you say, it's been around probably
yeah. And it's like
before
they're not
humans were
gaining
there.
anything from it, are they? It's
Yeah.
just out the kindness of their heart.
But anyway, and that's sort of like to wrap up on the stories there. It's lovely to see like especially in these times, there's companies helping those key workers. There's nurses who are able to reconnect with people who saved lives and changed the course of that part of history, and to see like the protection. It's just these wonderful little things I think that just come together, and it sort of creates this nice picture like we can really make a difference as as a group. We can make a difference as long as we work together.
Oh, definitely for sure.
Anyway, moving on from our news, and I'm sure this is probably the bit you're most excited about, we have our weekly film quiz. So just in case for people who haven't heard this before, how it works is I look up the worst descriptions I can find of films online, and then I read them out, and then whoever's our guest this week, who is Joe, has to give me his first answer to what he thinks the film is, and then it's 10 questions, 10 questions to ask, and we see how many you can score, and then people listening can also join in and see how many points they would score. You're currently aiming to beat 6 points. So on our
6 points.
first show we had Kira, Bex, and Freya on, and Bex managed to get 6 points, and then Tyler, who I think he was quite confident, he was saying he'd beat Bex's score, and then managed to tie with her.
Oh God.
So no pressure. I wouldn't say as
Oof,
long
no
as you're
pressure.
as long as you're scoring 6 points, you're sorted.
Okay.
You gotta keep the trend going, but you never know. You've got the theme for this week is films from 2010 to 2020. There
Ooh.
are films and TV shows, just as a little clear
Films and
clarification.
TV shows.
And then the ruling I've gone with is as long as the TV series was still airing in the 2010s, I've considered them part of that category.
So what? It could have started in previous decades.
So yeah, if you think like How I Met Your Mother, I believe ended in
Yeah,
the
that was
early
in like. Yeah, it started in
2010,
like
2011.
2005 and
Yeah,
then ended in like 2014, I think.
something like that. So that would be considered fair game in terms of
Okay.
a question. But anyway, I reckon this generation, I think it's very close to us, and based on the fact that we're both involved in the media, I think you might recognize some of these quite easily.
I should hope so.
Right, we'll start with the first one. Right, so Blank must defeat his girlfriend's 7 evil exes in order to win her
Yeah,
heart.
I know that one. That's
Yeah,
Scott Pilgrim versus the World.
it is Scott Pilgrim versus the World. Interesting little thing. I don't know if you ever saw the video game they released that was like 3 days before the film. Um, but there's
Yeah.
rumors floating about Ubisoft are planning to re-release it.
Oh, well, like a remastered version.
Yeah, well, the film was the game was originally pulled due to licensing issues. I think it
Oh,
was
did
just
it
one.
never come out then?
It did come out. It was like out for 4 years. It was in the 360
Oh.
generation, so they had DLC, and like the DLC was like Scott as a character and online play. So that was not to date the DLC world, but that was kind of early DLC days where you could sell playing online as DLC.
All right, yeah.
But it was out for 4 years. It did quite well, but I think it was some something due to the licensing issues and like expirations dates that sort of caused it to be pulled from all the marketplaces.
All
Um,
right.
but then the creator of Scott Pilgrim, like the writer, was tweeting about he misses the game, and then Ubisoft kind of responded like a sort of thinking emoji. So obviously,
Oh.
everyone's interpreted it as, oh, it's going to come back. But if
Mm.
it did come back, it'd be really cool because it was a really old school sort of beat 'em up, arcade style
Side
game.
scroller, yeah.
Yeah,
Like beat 'em up side scroller.
like if you listen to the music, I mean, I think some games have amazing soundtracks, but listening to that one, it's got such an amazing soundtrack. Um, and I think it's one of those games that has so much dedication, but it was done in 5 months, but it came out so well.
Yeah,
Anyway,
the soundtrack's done by a band called Anamanaguchi, I think it's pronounced.
okay.
It's a great, honestly, it's a great band. They're like, they kind of mix in like kind of 8-bit sounds with like proper kind of indie punk vibes. So
Yeah.
it's a really good band to check out, actually.
Oh, yeah. See, this is the benefit of having someone who's in the music industry. You've got that little bit extra detail. But yeah, when you say that, I can hear that sort of music with it. But that is something really cool to note. But anyway, so that's sort of hoping that that game comes back. But yeah, it was a fantastic film. I want to say it's Michael Cera, isn't it? Before I say it's the wrong person who played Scott.
Yes,
It is him. It's because there's the two people I always mix up, but I want to say it's him. And he, again, amazing performance, I think, there. Anyway, our second question, we've got, as a Harvard student, blank creates a social networking site that would become known as Facebook. He is sued by the twins who claimed he stole their idea and by the co-founders who later squeezed out of the business.
That the Social Network, by any chance?
It's a social network. It's one of those films that with a longer film, you have to be dedicated to watching it. I find like that film, I've watched it a couple of times, and you can just sit and watch it. It's like such an
It's a pretty easy film to watch, yeah.
The narrative doesn't feel like, it's unnaturally stretched out. It just kind of flows, and you're just kind of just drawn in the whole time because of it. 'Cause it's constantly, it's moving. It feels like, something's happening. We're not.
I hate films that are like so long that it gets to like a climax in the film and you're like, right, that's how it ends, and then it's got like another half hour and you're like, oh right.
Definitely not Justice League there by any means. Anyway, move on to our next one. And this one, feel free to cut in as soon as you know it, because I feel like you might recognize this one. A promising young drummer enrolls at a cutthroat music conservatory where his dreams of greatness are mentored by an instructor who will stop at nothing to realize its student potentials. Yeah,
that one. Yeah.
And what would that one be then?
Well, sorry, what? What's the name of it?
Yeah, what's the name of it?
Oh, Whiplash, yeah. Sorry.
There was a pause there for a second of, I know what it is. Sorry? What was that film? Yeah, it is Whiplash.
I thought I said it, sorry.
No.
My bad.
No, it's a film I think we both ended up studying at one point, and it is a fantastic film, but it's one of those films, I wouldn't say it's hard to watch, but when you're watching like the instructor and how brutal he is,
yeah,
I feel like there's that moment, not you're cringing, but you've got to kind of look away for a brief second because
you feel uncomfortable. Yeah, I think that's good storytelling, though.
Oh yeah, I mean the actors are on point for the whole film, but it feels like you're kind of almost drawn into that world, and you're there, and you're like, "Ooh, I don't like this. This guy's so brutal." But yeah, anyway, you're going solid here. You've got straight 3 points at the moment, so you're going strong.
Oh God, this is where it all goes downhill.
We say that, right? Team Blank becomes Spider-Man of his reality, crossing his paths with 5 counterparts from other dimensions to stop a threat for all realities.
Is that Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse?
It is Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse.
Let's go! Woo!
I was tempted to take away Spider-Man from you as well, but I was like, if I take that away, you're going to be sat there questioning it. But I mean, it was a fantastically animated film, and I think I actually ended up watching it when I was flying back from America. I had some like awful crossover flights where like one of my flights got cancelled because it was a thunderstorm. But a lot of these flights in America, they'll do like especially if you're doing international flights, they'll have like films on the plane. Yeah. And it was one of those films that was on there, and I was like, I've not watched this yet. I'll sit down and watch it. But it draws you in.
It's like You've got a few hours to kill. Might as
Yeah,
well.
just a few. But the film itself, it's such a, like a, I want to say artistically, like the animation just flows. I don't know if that's the right way to describe animation itself, but everything feels so alive in the film.
Yeah, I think there was a specific way in which they. Oh, that was it. So a cool fact about the film is that
Mm.
so I'm going to talk about briefly about the plot. So
Yeah,
spoiler
go for it. I
alert
mean,
if no one's seen it, but like a good thing about so obviously so films are in 24 frames per second, right?
mm,
Um, and a cool thing is the Spider-Man that's mentoring Miles Morales.
mm.
He's animated at 24 frames per second, whereas Miles is animated at 12 frames per second. So he, in comparison to the other Spider-Man, feels a bit clunky, and the other Spider-Man feels a bit fluid. But as soon as Miles gets his powers and he becomes Spider-Man, in a sense, he's then animated at 24 frames per second,
Wow,
which is like kind of a showcasing of look, he's become Spider-Man, he's all fluid and smooth now, rather than a bit janky.
that's pretty cool. Actually, I've never actually known that. That's such like a small extra detail just to ingrain into the film. Honestly,
Yeah,
that
and
is something
like
fascinating to learn about.
when if you rewatch it, you'll notice like Miles is a bit like, especially in the scene in the forest when
Mm.
but they're both swinging. Like Spider-Man has a lot more fluid movements, and Miles is a bit janky and a bit cartoony.
Oh, that's really cool to see there. I mean, also with the film, like I think that was the first time I heard the song "Sunflower." I mean,
Yeah, it's got a
honestly,
great soundtrack.
it does, doesn't it? But like, I feel like that's just one of the heavier advertised songs I think from the film was "Sunflower."
Yeah, I think it's
Or
the lead song.
yeah, or that one that ended up everywhere on social media. But it's such again, it just flowed with the film so well. Um,
Yeah,
but like you say,
for
it's
sure.
probably to do with the animation, like like the actual motion to it. It's so interesting to learn about that. But anyway, you're going solid here with a solid 4 points. No one, the highest we got was Tyler
Ooh.
last week, going for three in a row. So
Oh.
you might be breaking away from the norm here. A malfunctioning time machine at a ski resort takes a man back to 1986 with his two friends and nephew, where they relive a fateful night and not change. They relive a fateful night and must not change anything to make sure their nephew is born. This is a
Oh
bit more of an
my,
indie film.
a
Um,
bit more of an indie film.
well, like as in, it wasn't a mainstream like popular film, but it did get a sequel.
Is
Um,
it Hot Tub Time Machine?
it is Hot Tub Time Machine. I'm very impressed you know that
Yeah.
one.
Oh, I
Uh,
mean, I went with the. I don't think there's a lot of time travel films in the past decade.
no, not as much, but it stands out there to me because it's one of those like again just funny films I think, and I mean it's got surprisingly a really strong cast. You've got Rob Corddry, Craig Robinson, and then like even
Oh,
like minor characters like Chevy Chase, who was like in Community,
oh yeah,
like playing those minor roles. But it was such a strong film, and they ended up making a sequel. Like I think one of the actors didn't come back. There was some, I think it was still with contract issues, but the first film it was like a proper like just comedy time travel film, and I think, like you say, you know it because there aren't as many, I think, in the world, like in terms of time travel films. But then
yeah,
you've
for
got like
sure.
any time travel film, you always get the scrutiny of like, oh, but if this person did this, then this should have affected this. Like,
Yeah, there's always issues when you make a time travel film. It's like even with Avengers Endgame, that still had a lot of criticism about how they dealt with time travel.
oh yeah, of course. I mean, as soon as you use time travel, it never works. I mean,
Yeah,
like that's why Rick and Morty, I think, kind of poke fun of it a lot because they like the creator knows as soon as he uses time travel, he's gonna really struggle with like explaining it, or someone else will notice a detail, and it's such a hard thing to like have all the details in point. So we always that one little thing where you need the narrative to progress, but in order to do that, you kind of have to bend the rules a little bit.
yeah, for sure,
But
definitely.
anyway, the more exciting news beyond actual time travel films is you are currently on 5 points. So at the
Cool.
moment, you are at least looking like you'll tie it up if we can keep this going.
Oh
But
God.
you might be taking the crown right now. Right, so Blank is an unnoticed high school student and comic book fan who one day decides to become a superhero, even though he has no
Kick ass.
power. Yeah, it is.
Yes! Yes! Let's go. That's 6.
You're tied up.
We're
So
currently
right now,
tied.
I can say, Joe, quite happily, you can't do worse than anyone else on the show. You've secured that. So if you want to just, bomb the next 4 questions and just completely mess them up, you're safe. But we'll keep you going, see if we can keep this momentum going. When a criminal mastermind uses a trio of orphan girls as pawns for a grand scheme, he finds their love is profoundly changing him for the better.
Oh, Despicable Me.
It's Despicable Me. You are on a roll today. I don't know if it's just because these are more recent films, but you are on a roll. But sort of saying about Despicable Me, when that first came out, you'd never thought of the franchise it would create behind it.
Yeah, I think the Minions alone they just skyrocketed that studio so much.
Well, I remember, I think seeing early trailers about when the film was originally coming out, and it was a heavier focus on Gru as the main character, and he's gonna steal the moon or something. That was the major plot point. And then all of a sudden, these minions were kind of almost mixed into the first film, and by the second film, they're everywhere. And then they've had 3 films in their main franchise and 2 prequel films more about the minions themselves.
Oh yeah, Minions 1 and 2, I think.
Yeah, because I think Minion 2 comes out fairly soon, and that might be another one of those digital straight releases now because of what's happening. But again, it's a franchise that they've been able to market so well. But you look at that first film, and you never think that's the direction it's going to go. It just feels like it's a standalone film in that sense.
Yeah, definitely.
Right. Well, I can now confirm you have definitely, by all means, taken the high score.
Yes.
So now we're just purely at the point of how far can you go to protect your score.
Oh my goodness.
Right. So 4 people and their otherworldly frenemies struggle in the afterlife to define what it means to be good.
Oh my goodness.
I did think this was a bit more of a brutal one, but I did also see some of the easier ones for you. So I thought this one is a little bit more of a challenge.
Can you read that again, please?
So 4 people and their otherworldly frenemies struggle in the afterlife to define what it means to be good.
4 people and their otherworldly frenemies.
We're going to analyze this now.
I am.
I mean, this could be purely you just never seen it. So, there's always that factor.
Can I have a clue? A clue's a thing.
I'll throw you a little clue your way by saying it does have in the cast, just while I'm just double checking I don't say it wrong, Ted Danson, Ted Danson, who was in other things like Cheers and was in CSI. If that helps you anyway, ring a bell.
So 4 people.
I can just feel like the little clock's ticking right now.
Otherworldly. And their otherworldly frenemy struggle in the afterlife.
I'm going to have to push you for an answer here.
Is it... Oh, you said there's TV shows. Is it The Good Place?
It is The Good Place. You worked your way there. I'm very impressed. I honestly thought that one would stick here a bit, and I didn't know if you'd seen it on Netflix.
I've seen it. I think I've watched half of the first season.
Oh, it's worth sticking out. And that description itself may actually slightly affect your viewing now if you do go back to it. But yeah, no, I'm actually very impressed you knew that one. And I think actually the next question, I went a bit easier on you because I thought that last one was quite harsh. So this one I think went a bit too easy. A high school chemistry teacher diagnosed with a disease turns to manufacturing and selling methamphetamine. It is, and I'm sure
it's Breaking Bad.
It is. Oh, you've seen the competition and you've just taken away. I don't know if perhaps the 2010 films were too recent, but you've certainly taken the tile here. At this point,
did you watch the Breaking Bad movie?
I did. It was what was it called? It was something.
El Camino.
Yeah, it focused on the whole Jesse escaping.
Yeah, honestly, it felt kind of like just another episode.
It did. It didn't feel like it was a forced movie in that sense. It was obviously, it was popular, so they wanted to bring it back on Netflix
Yeah.
for a one-off. But it was like, it did just kind of like more build to this sort of Breaking Bad world instead of like adding too much.
Yeah,
It just felt
definitely.
like it put in some extra like plot points here and there just to like build into some other understandings. And like,
Yeah.
not to spoil too much, but we had that bit with Walter in it as well. And
Yeah.
it just sort of like, it's a nice summary of like what the relationship between the two main characters were.
Good thing about it is like it fills in a lot of some of the TV show. Like I've said to someone that started watching Breaking Bad, and I said to them because I've watched Breaking Bad. I've tried to watch it like a bunch of times, and I always get to like season 3 and just end up not watching more for some weird reason. So I'm always like, you can watch up to like season 3 and then watch the movie, and it kind of fills in the blanks.
Yeah, in a way, yeah. You can,
Yeah.
yeah, because of course, it's so heavily focused on sort of just Jesse and sort of like the more, not even Jesse necessarily, but like sort of the other sort of big players in the game and sort of what they were, where they are now. It kind of fills them in on like where they ended up. But no, that is pretty interesting actually to think of it like that. But for a film, I think it was, a nice sort of like hour-long TV episode, really.
Yeah, definitely.
So that's why I was like, with Breaking Bad, I was like, I went nice with you on that one because I thought The Good Place was a harsh one, but yeah, smashed both of them out. Right, so just to finish up here and see if we can get you on a perfect score,
Oh
a
God.
group of criminals must pull together to stop a warrior with plans to purge the universe.
Oh, a group of criminals. Is it Suicide Squad?
Oh, very close. You're actually kind of on the right line of superhero films, but we're actually Marvel films. It's Guardians of the Galaxies.
Oh, that's
I
a
thought,
shame.
again, I went nice with that one, thinking you might go,
I
but I
mean,
can say you have gotten the
nobody's
highest score.
perfect.
You have got the high score so far. You've taken away
9.
the crown from Tyler and Bex with 6 points each, and you've done it an upside down 6, really. You've scored a 9. But yeah, I think these are all recently made stuff, and it's really stuff that's worth watching. Like, obviously, I think we may have spoiled a few, like the Breaking Bad and Spider-Man, but I think it's really good quality stuff that has been made in the last decade, and it's really interesting to see where we'll go for this generation.
Yeah,
Um,
that is like there's a lot of films that have been announced in the next couple of years that do sound quite promising.
and they've got a second Spider-Verse film coming out. I mean, obviously, we don't know many details,
Oh
but they've
yes.
announced that, and just the fact you point out that little animation detail, it just makes me want to go rewatch this one and be like, ooh, what are they going to do to play with on the second one? But anyway, that sort of brings us to the end of the show. Obviously, be sure to check us out on our social media pages like Instagram, Facebook, where we're excellent news delivery on both of those. Be sure to subscribe because we do this weekly podcast every Friday. And if you want to sort of plug where you are, Joe, and where people can find you.
Literally, like you can find me on any form of social media: Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, with the username Brosif UK. So Brosif and then UK. So
Right.
yeah,
Very cool. Well,
thank you for having me on the podcast. It was very
hey,
fun.
no worries. And like I say, you've taken the high score here, so you're leaving proud there, I think. But
Yeah, exactly. With my head held high.
but thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you next time. See ya.